Number 1 contender Robert "The Reaper" Whittaker still considers himself the UFC's most destructive middleweight, despite coming up short against the current champion twice. It's rare for a fighter to overcome an opponent against whom they have 2 championship losses, but the Reaper has done nothing but improve every time he steps into the octagon. Let's dive a bit deeper into this idea in today's video and talk about some of the comments he's made ahead of the fight. Starting off, why Robert thinks he's a more dangerous fighter than the champion. Both Izzy and Whittaker are at the top of the middleweight food chain, but Robert pointed out that he's a fundamentally different fighter than Adesanya. The Reaper is always pushing the action, looking to inflict damage and finish his opponents when possible. Izzy, on the other hand, has been receiving a great deal of criticism for his recent performances. Fans think he's running from the competition, content with unanimous decision victories that aren't as entertaining as some of Israel's knockouts during his title run. Robert claimed that it's nothing new though, and that's how Israel has always fought. He's a fighter with near-perfect defense and relies heavily on his counterattacks. It's just that his previous opponents fell into this trap. Title defenses are the highest level of competition, and it's not easy to finish guys who have become very aware of Izzy's tactics. In contrast, Whittaker said he's always tried to inflict damage. If we look at both fighters' performances against Yoel Romero, it remains Izzy's worst performance to date. However, in both his fights against Yoel, Whittaker went 5 action-packed rounds both times. Moving on, the mistakes that cost Whittaker the title. The first time the middleweight giants collided was Izzy's crowning night at UFC 243, and the current champion looked flawless that night. Whittaker couldn't make it out the second round without getting countered and knocked out, after getting dropped really badly in the final moments of the first round. Before their second fight at UFC 271, Whittaker explained how it was perhaps the only time he went into a fight with little control over his emotions. His ego kept flaring at tiny things, like the Australia versus New Zealand trash talk from Izzy, and made him reckless during the fight. Bobby Knuckles pointed out, truthfully, that his fighting style has always been aggressive, but never reckless. We can imagine the magnitude of the situation. Robert's still a relatively new champion, beating Yoel Romero twice to get where he was, now facing a fan-favorite fighter that'd been on a meteoric rise at the company. It made him rush in repeatedly, falling into Izzy's trap and getting knocked out. These are mistakes that weigh heavily on the Australian fighter, and his life has taken a single-minded focus to once again become the baddest man in the division. When Bobby Knuckles says it was just a momentary lapse for him, there's sincerity in the statement, because his only 2 losses in his past 15 bouts are to Izzy. Next up, the Reaper looks more dangerous with each performance. Out of the spray of his own blood spilled inside the octagon rose and evolved Robert Whittaker. He was tested thrice after losing the belt against the very best the world has to offer at 185 pounds. First, he thoroughly dispatched Darren Till by dominating him in boxing, scoring the only knockdown of the fight, and the wrestling by scoring the only 2 takedowns scored in all 5 rounds. Many doubted Robert's chin after getting knocked down twice against Izzy, and Till has always had a lethal left hand. But all the power in the world couldn't help him because he just couldn't touch Whittaker. Next in line came the Killer Gorilla, Jared Cannonier, a future number 1 contender. Jared was a former heavyweight and had unmatched power within the division, but another masterclass by Whittaker saw Jared knocked down once and won Whittaker the unanimous decision. Kelvin Gastelum didn't fare any better against the Reaper, and no one could deny him another shot at the belt. Additionally, Whittaker's second loss was closer than you might think. The decision might have been unanimous in favor of Adesanya at UFC 271 when he clashed against Whittaker for the second time, but the MMA community was split. Many believe Whittaker won the last 3 rounds of the fight, and the scorecards were pretty close too, at 49-46, 48-47, and 48-47. When Whittaker says the third fight will definitely happen, it's because he knows he's the only person who came that close to beating Adesanya since he won the belt. Even in the second fight, it could have gone very differently had there been different judges, or if Whittaker had made the adjustments before he got knocked down. The Reaper approached both fights differently, not rushing into counters in the second fight like he did before. He recovered much better after getting dropped in the first round and went on to win the later rounds. He looked much more like a complete MMA fighter as well, being one of the few to successfully take Adesanya down, 4 times no less. After his loss to Adesanya, he went on to beat the Italian Dream Marvin Vettori, a fighter who had only lost to Adesanya in his last 8 fights and has been a top contender for years. If Whittaker can put together another win, there is a very serious argument for Izzy Whittaker 3. Finally, what's next for Robert other than a title match? The Reaper has often hinted at a move up to light heavyweight, and if he loses for the 3rd time against Adesanya, or can't manage to capture the belt if there's a new champ after UFC 281, he might have no choice but to go up a weight class. This wouldn't be the first time he's moved up either. Whittaker joined the UFC through the Ultimate Fighter as a welterweight, and his career had a topsy-turvy start until he decided to bite the bullet and move up. If he decides to do so again, he said he'll retire at 205. While Bobby Knuckles has never given fans a reason to doubt his abilities, 205 is full of some pretty big boys. Whittaker definitely has power, but light heavyweights will have an even larger height and reach advantage than some middleweights do. If he can alter his game to account for that one factor, we believe he would make an interesting twist in the title picture at light heavyweight. In other news, firstly, Daniel Cormier makes his debut WWE appearance. DC is really enjoying retirement life and has decided to fulfill a childhood dream of millions around the world. Make an appearance on Monday Night Raw. The former 2-division world champion is scheduled to be a guest referee at WWE's next pay-per-view event, Extreme Rules, between Seth Rollins and Matt Riddle. The two were engaged in yet another trash-talking session when Cormier appeared on the Jumbotron, breaking up the feud and reminding them he'll have no funny business at the Extreme Rules. Cormier put on a very convincing performance, trying to reach out to both fighters. Riddle is a former UFC fighter, and Cormier pulled on the strings of fraternity and Rollins he said he admired. But their ongoing feud has been going on for so long and has been so crazy that everyone wants a final resolution. And it looks like Cormier is there to make sure we get it at Extreme Rules. Next up, Jake Paul says he's training MMA. YouTube-turned-professional boxer Jake Paul is looking to make yet another transition in his professional career. The unbeaten fighter recently reported to be in conversation with a major MMA organization about putting together a fight. But with how vocal Dana White has been about the Paul brothers never fighting in the UFC, we doubt it's the UFC. Before any moves, Paul has to get through bona fide MMA legend and future Hall of Famer Anderson Silva in a professional boxing match, after which he said he intends to train at Khabib's old gym, aka under Javier Mendez, for up to a year and a half before getting into the cage. Paul has a solid wrestling background in college and has some training in jiu-jitsu alongside his boxing training. What he needs to learn is to utilize kicks and defend against them, and string together the different aspects of MMA. If he does get into the cage though, his true mettle would be tested, that's for sure. Finally, MMA fighter runs marathon to raise awareness. BJ Garceau, who fights out of Greenbush, will be trading in her MMA mat for a running track as she trains for a marathon she's going to run in NYC for Beyond Type 1 on the 6th of November. The organization works to tackle diabetes, an illness Garceau herself was diagnosed with back in 1995. The amateur fighter is 2-2 in her career, which started in 2018 and last fought in July for the New England Fights 48 Heat Wave. MMA training is no joke, but the NYC Marathon is often regarded as one of the most difficult accomplishments in sports today. Garceau said this is an opportunity for her to show everyone that suffers from diabetes that even with the illness, you can achieve great things and accomplish any milestone you put your mind to. She has our best wishes, that's for sure. Whether Robert Whittaker fights for the middleweight title again and who he fights will become much clearer after Pereira vs. Adesanya at UFC 281 next month. Who do you think wins at UFC 281 and how the Reaper might perform against them? Down in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video and want more MMA content, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to our channel.